It's fair to say that staying private on today's internet can be pretty difficult, with companies online trying their best to track you by your IP address, your browser cookies, device fingerprinting, tracking pixels, and like a few other dozen methods. So with that being said, it's actually not surprising at all how some of your personal data eventually ends up in someone's hands, or rather, in someone's database. But out of all the companies that deal with user data in one shape or another, the worst and, in my opinion, the creepiest offenders aren't the ones that collect it, but rather the ones who build entire profiles using that data and then sell it to make a profit. Data brokers. Now, I want to preface this video to say that while the issue of data collection and data brokers is definitely global, meaning that online it affects us all in one shape or another, it's also fair to say that this problem is way worse in the US, where data privacy laws are quite frankly terrible, compared to the EU at least. And look, you've probably seen plenty of videos about data brokers here on YouTube already. This topic is not new at all. But to explain it, yeah, there are entire companies whose whole job and business model revolves around collecting personal data about real people, such as you, and then selling it for profit. Which I'm sure some of you might say that depending on the type of data they're collecting, it shouldn't be that concerning. Like, who cares if someone knows if I'm using a Windows PC or a Mac, or if I'm using a Chrome browser or Safari, or if they know my name or my email? Fine. But what about data like your home address, your family members' info, your mortgage, your income or court records, or even your medical information? For example, information about your income or finances could be used against you to decline credit, hike up your insurance costs, and more. What I'm getting at is that some information collected about you online can certainly be trivial, but it can also be extremely sensitive. But let's dive deeper in how data brokers and data collection might affect you in general. Now, I'm sure you are familiar with browser cookies. I mean, it seems like almost every news site you visit gives you this pop-up asking if you accept cookies. By the way, it's usually, mostly, always a good idea to decline the consent of browser cookies. But if you do click accept, you might find that you'll start to get more relevant ads. Like if you search for a computer part to buy or something simple like a keyboard, you'll start to get ads for such products across multiple sites. This is again thanks to browser cookies, which deal with de-identified data, which means that this type of data doesn't include something like your name or email. As you can imagine, companies love browser cookies as they can show you relevant ads. And this practice isn't necessarily shady. What is shady, however, is marketing data brokers who might use tools like browser cookies, browsing activity data, public social media pages to build profiles of people so it can be sold to companies or even scammers. This data collected by marketing data brokers isn't necessarily identifiable until it is. Because if I'm a scammer who just purchased a bunch of data from such a data broker with accurate profiles that also include phone numbers, that's a literal goldmine for me. Scammers can use such data to contact you, and what's very scary is that by using that data, they can even tailor their social engineering attack around it. Say calling 100 people who recently bought a computer and build a scam around fake suspicious activity about that said computer when in reality nothing happened. I'm sure you're familiar with such cases. But that's exactly why such data brokers like marketing ones can be so dangerous if your data is not deleted from their databases, because it can be used against you and affect real lives. Which actually reminds me of one of the best things that I've heard online when it comes to privacy, which I still think about to this day, and that is that online privacy isn't a concern until it affects you on a deeper level. Speaking of which, let's change gears and talk about another type of data broker, people search sites. So I'd urge you right now, or after you're done watching this video, to go online and look up yourself in one of these people search sites and see just how much information they might have about you. There are tons of these sites online that can store sensitive data about you, like your home address, your age, date of birth, info about your family members, and more. I think this exercise of looking up yourself on one of these sites can act as a good wake-up call, because it feels different than targeted advertising, as this data is laid out plainly and is often very personal. Now, luckily, I did not find any information about myself on these sites, as I am an EU citizen, but when I did a search on my friend who lives in the US, things were a lot different. I found a ton of information including his past and current home addresses, his age, birth date, social media profiles, and surprisingly, the site also had data about his other family members, which we confirmed to be correct. Suffice to say, my friend was in a bit of a shock when he saw all this. These search sites can also be labeled as people search brokers, and their services are in most cases free to access to anyone, meaning that if you or someone wanted to get information about a particular person, you could do it super easily or at minimal costs, as usually only the more expansive background reports are paid, and even then it only costs less than a cup of coffee, which as you can imagine can be pretty dangerous as it can lead to doxing and someone you don't want getting your information. What's also important to note is that people search sites are considered to be public data brokers. They work on collecting publicly available records such as court filings, phone book records, social media profiles, and things like that. Sort of modern version of those big phone books, if you remember that. With a big difference that people search sites compile all collected data points into a singular profile, which is then sold to whoever wants it. But the world of data brokers is far deeper than that, as there are also private data brokers. And these can include the brokers we spoke of before, such as marketing ones, meaning they work with information that is private. Duh. But what's important to note is that they can sometimes take information from private sources where you didn't even know you were giving this info away in the first place, or without even knowing the company in question. Private data brokers deal with data like personal details, including where you live, who your relatives are, and neighbors and such, and how many properties you own, in what household you were raised, what you buy, where you live, and etc. From there, it can be sold to hedge funds, insurance companies, advertisers, and government agencies like military, the FBI, and the ICE. All that to say that public data brokers are just the tip of the iceberg, and private data brokers make up the bulk of the shady data collection that these companies do. In fact, public data brokers make up just 1/3 of the Californian data broker registry. Risk mitigation data brokers, financial data brokers, and the creepiest of all, health information data brokers would all be placed in the private data broker category. But alright, this whole data broker thing is a giant can of worms and goes way deeper than we thought. However, if you got caught up in seeing targeted ads or even faced countless spam calls from marketing agencies or even had a scam call or two that seemed to know quite a lot about you, then you probably asked yourself, can I make these data broker companies somehow delete my information? Is there a form I can fill up to stop it? Is there a magical button that I can just press and make my data disappear from their databases? Well, yes and no. Let me explain. To start, yes, a lot of data brokers like people search sites will actually remove your data from their databases upon your request. This can be done via manual opt-out methods like emailing the data broker in question and or requiring you to fill a form online through many convoluted menus instead, which sounds as fun as you might think, meaning it's really not fun. But it might also sound time-consuming, and that's because it is. As we spoke before, there are an absolute ton of different data brokers out there, and it can be difficult researching and knowing which of these hundreds of different companies have your data. What's worse is that for some data brokers, sending an email, or rather filling that form to delete and stop collecting your data, is not enough. I mean, sure, they will comply and to delete your data. However, after a certain period of time, there's a very good chance that they will recollect it again. It's a shady practice, but in order to stay in business, some of brokers actually do this. Adding insult to injury is the fact that new data brokers pop up all the time, so it adds to the overall time you have to spend to find them. So you're probably noticing a theme here. Finding data brokers manually is certainly possible, but it is also time consuming and is not a one-time or permanent solution. It's kind of like cleaning your room. You can do it once and it will be clean for a certain period of time, but chances are it will eventually get dirty and dusty again, unless you live in space or something. I guess building on my analogy of cleaning your room, you might be aware of robot vacuum cleaners, which try to automate cleaning or at least cleaning one part of your house. So is there something like that but for cleaning up your data from data brokers? Let's finally shift gears and talk about data deletion services. They tackle the whole data broker problem by analyzing which brokers have your data and then doing all the emailing and data deletion request form filling for you automatically, which sounds actually amazing. Just imagine how much time such a service can save you by doing all the work for you. But does it actually really work? Yes, it does. However, there are some things to keep in mind, and especially there's key aspects to look for when choosing a data deletion service. To begin, some data broker deletion services tend to really bloat up their numbers to make you feel like you're getting a really good deal for your money. So say instead of saying that they tackled and deleted your data from one data broker, they might instead say something like, oh, we deleted 10 points of data. This can inflate the numbers of the service and give you a false sense of you getting more value than you actually are. For instance, Surfshark's Incognito tool doesn't do this, instead focusing on giving you the number of data deletion requests sent and letting you review the progress and such in a separate menu. Now, if you remember earlier in the video, we also covered different data broker types, the public ones and the private ones. And that's a very important distinction we need to make, as some data deletion services only cover public data brokers. For example, Incognito is currently focused on removing data from registered data brokers in the Californian Data Broker Registry, which as of 2025 has 514 brokers total, and that includes both public and private data brokers. Finally, a good personal data deletion service will not only delete your data just once, but rather make sure it stays deleted with recurring deletion requests. Again, we spoke earlier about data brokers who tend to recollect your data after deletion, so it's important to send recurring requests to make sure it remains deleted. One thing to note though is that some brokers, not all, and actually not a lot of them, do have so-called suppression lists where they won't collect data of whoever is on it. Incognito, for example, tries to get you on that list. However, the problem is that, again, not a lot of data brokers have one, and therefore recurring requests need to be sent out every couple months or so to keep your data from being stored and sold again. Also, you might have heard how your data you're trying to delete will be replaced again, unless you're in one of the states that has the right to delete law, which in a way is true. There are currently 10 states in the US that have the necessary privacy laws to enable you, the user, to delete your data. But that being said, a service like Incognito will still be extremely useful even if you live outside of these states or countries, as data brokers still comply with data deletion requests. In fact, I actually asked the Incognito team about this, and they said that they see similar compliance across states and countries that have and don't have data removal laws. But in conclusion, private information deletion services are an excellent tool to get your data deleted from data brokers, especially if you get the right one. They can also save you a lot of time from doing it all yourself, and as a result, it will protect you from getting spam calls, robocalls, getting doxed, identity theft, and such. These tools are certainly not perfect, nor do they claim to be. However, the problem of data brokers is a big one, and services like Incognito are tools to help you deal with it, especially if you don't want to do all the research and the burden of filling up web forms, emailing back and forth with these companies to have your data deleted. But speaking of which, I'll leave a link below to Incognito's free-to-use digital footprint checker. It will help you identify companies that may have your data that you could delete yourself. And above all else, the source of the problem and the reason why services like Incognito exist in the first place is because data collection is a thing, and it will be a thing if companies are allowed to continue doing it. Better privacy regulations need to be put in place in the US and elsewhere for a real change to happen. I'll leave another link below to where you can find your local representative in the US and let them know that the data collection and data broker issue is a real issue and is honestly something that affects us all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Take care.